I'm Denise Galen, Director of Special Education here at Hempfield, and I'd like the two ladies to introduce themselves also.
Hi, I'm Meredith Goodrich. I'm the Elementary Special Education Supervisor.
And I'm Kelly Walsh, the Secondary Supervisor. I'm not going to talk a lot.
We actually gave Kelly a reprieve this evening. She's here to support us, but she is not going to speak tonight. Thank you for coming out. We're going to just do an overview of what special education services and programming looks like here at Hempfield School District. So with not much further ado, we'll get started. Purpose of special education is to provide specially designed instruction and programming to students that qualify for services in at least one of the 12 areas of disability categories under Chapter 14. And that is all defined in the chapter of law in the state of Pennsylvania. And we'll talk a little bit about what those disability areas are in a few slides. There's requirements in special education which are very important. They really define what we do and how we move through our processes. The first one is child find, and that has to do with the evaluation of really locating students who are struggling learners and determining whether they have disabilities or not. These learners are learners who are in Hempfield School District. They may be learners in our schools. They could be learners in private schools, but their families reside in Hempfield School District, and also homeschooled students. And it is our responsibility to provide evaluation for those students to determine if they are indeed students with disabilities. Through the child find, they can be brought to the surface as far as through a school team may feel that a student is struggling and bring them to the referral process, or a parent may. And if you think of as far as homeschool students, that would definitely come through a parent referral. Those are the two ways that we work through the child find process. Next requirement through special education is a free and appropriate public education. And this really defines us. This is what we are required to provide students under special education. It's really our standard of what we are working for in special education, is that free and appropriate. Next is the least restrictive environment. And I know when you're looking at special education, a lot of people think that when you're talking about least restrictive, are we talking about, that regular education, and then we work through each rung of support? And that is exactly what least restrictive is talking about. We look at students in regular education. How can we layer supports within regular education to meet their needs? If we cannot, what other supports and services and programs? Is there another placement that will better meet their needs? But the important thing here also in least restrictive is what is least restrictive for one student may not necessarily be least restrictive for another. And that's, again, very important in special education is it is on a student-by-student basis. The next area is educational benefits. And this is where we look at our students' IEPs, goals, and objectives. And we are obligated to move students to make sure that they make educational benefit. This is in addition to working through the curriculum, working through their daily lessons. As far as that IEP, and that is an individualized education plan, each student in special education has one. We are obligated to ensure that that student makes what's called educational benefit. Pass this off to you, is that right? Okay. And I did say we would get into the disability categories.
Yeah. So what you're seeing on the slide here are the different categories that students can be found eligible for special education within Pennsylvania. And the numbers behind them show you here at Hempfield how many students we currently have identified in each of those categories. Some students will have more than one disability category. So there might be a student who has been identified as a student with autism, but in addition, they might also have a learning disability, a speech and language impairment. There can be other categories that a student also falls into. Our goal when we do an evaluation is to find the category that best describes the student. That way, if a family were to move to another district, the paperwork that goes with that student makes it so that that district doesn't have to start over again. They have all the information that they need, and it really truly describes the student as a learner. The disability category does not drive placement. And so what we mean by that is there could be a student with autism, and that doesn't necessarily mean that that student is going to be supported in autistic support. It's going to be whatever the needs of the student, whatever needs the student is showing and demonstrating, we're going to go with an educational placement and a level of service that matches that. So talking a little about programming, within our special education department, there are several different types of special education classes that we offer. Autistic support, we have autistic support in actually all of our levels now. That is more of almost like a self-contained classroom. The classes have smaller numbers of students in there, and the primary focus is communication. Obviously, also, there are academics, and it is very individualized based, but that is going to be for students who have that really strong need for communication skills. We also have students who receive something that we would call itinerant autistic support, and so that would be a student who would be within the regular education setting the majority of their day, and then maybe receive some pull-out services here and there for that support. Learning support, which is where the majority of our students receive services, has multiple different tiers of support as well. Itinerant level support is support that pretty much happens within regular education with just a little bit of time outside of the regular education classroom. We also have what's described as supplemental learning support, and so you're looking at almost a split between the day of time in special education and time in regular education. And then we do have some students who are serviced in what we call full-time learning support, where they would spend the majority of their day within the full-time learning support classroom. Life skills support is another level of support for students that also focuses on academics, but there's another functional piece to the curriculum in that classroom where as students get older, we really start to focus on daily living skills and some of those functional skills that aren't necessarily things that you always think about being taught in school above and beyond academics, but working on transition skills and working on, at the younger ages, personal information, making sure that students are going to be able to be safe when they're not with their parents and being able to, contact help if they need it. So those types of social skills and functional skills are also built into that curriculum. We have emotional support. The primary focus of emotional support is for students who need additional help in the areas of behavior, emotions, and safety. Again, within emotional support, we have several different tiers. We have students who receive maybe just social skills instruction each day, and then the rest of their day is in the regular education setting. But then we also do have students who spend the majority of their day within emotional support. It really is driven by student need. And then we also have speech and language support. When a student is identified as having speech and language as their only disability, then that is considered their special education placement, even though they're not in a specialized class for that. If a student has a different disability category in addition to that, speech and language becomes a related service. So there would not be a classroom in the district called speech and language that a student would spend the whole day in. Speech and language is a related service, which varies based on need, how much time each student gets in speech and language, but it's not going to be your traditional model like the other ones that would have a classroom teacher. The speech and language sessions would be led by one of our district speech and language pathologists. And speaking of our staff, we have many different levels of professionals within our department. First and foremost are our teachers. The teachers are every day engaged in direct instruction, in support. Some are engaged in co-teaching within the regular education classroom. In addition to their teaching responsibilities, they're also case managing. So depending on the level of support a student is receiving, that determines how many students students a teacher can case manage. So for example, in some of our classes, like an autistic support class, that teacher can only have up to 8 students on his or her roster. And the teacher would be responsible for doing their state mandated reevaluations and writing the IEPs and monitoring the goals and communicating with parents to talk about progress or changes that need to be made to the educational program. In a learning support environment, an itinerant learning support environment, which would be that lowest tier of support as we would work up through, those teachers, now we have never gone this high, but those teachers could have up to 50 students on their caseload. That's not 50 students in one classroom together. That's just from a case management standpoint. The teacher could be responsible for that many IEPs. But like I said, we don't do that at Hempfield. We've never had to get that high. The next group of professionals are our psychologists. Our psychologists have many different roles that they play within the buildings, and it does even vary from elementary to middle school to high school. But their primary function is they are our assessors. They are doing the psychoeducational evaluations, they're doing the reevaluations, they're consulting with teams and providing recommendations for things that teachers can do with students within the classroom. Above and beyond that, they're also leading teams in working on functional behavior assessments. They're helping to put together positive behavior support plans. They're teaching social skills. They're doing one-on-one counseling. So they have a really, really busy role. And like I said, it does look a little different from elementary to middle school to high school, but those are all facets of their job. We also have speech and language therapists or speech and language pathologists. They do also have varying roles across the district. Their primary role is to support students that have needs within communication. And for some students, that's simply articulation. So how they form the letters, how they say words so that they are intelligible to maybe someone who doesn't know them. There's also another piece, which is language. And so they're working on teaching pragmatic language, which is social language, and how to start a conversation and how to stay on topic within that conversation. They're also teaching social skills. They're pushing into classrooms. We're really fortunate in this district that we have a fabulous program called Diagnostic Kindergarten, where we have a speech therapist who co-teaches the entire morning with a special education teacher, so that speech and language is really infused into the entire morning for those kindergarten students who really need to develop their communication skills. So again, across the different levels and different buildings, their jobs can look very different, but they're all working on enhancing the communication needs of all of our students. We also have occupational therapists. We have one occupational therapist within the district, and then we also have an occupational therapist assistant, and they have a very large role considering how large our district is, and it's just the two of them. But what they are doing is they're working with students who have fine motor deficits. So in the younger grades, it can be things like cutting and letter formation and tracing. And then as they move up through, they're working on maybe keyboarding for students who haven't been able to acquire the fine motor that they need. They're working with assistive technology devices. They are the leads in helping us determine whether students have sensory needs that we need to be finding interventions for. They've put together sensory rooms in a lot of our elementary buildings. So they also have a very large job. They also progress monitor IEPs and provide input to teams and even work with some regular ed teachers for strategies that help all students within the classroom.
Meredith took care of the professional staff, and then we move on to our support staff. We are blessed to have 2 levels of support staff in our special education department. We have paraeducators. Paraeducators are individuals that work with special education classrooms and teachers. They're assigned to that role, and they will work with groups of students or possibly one-on-one, depending on the needs of the students in the class at that time. And they will support lessons, instruction, as it has been planned out by the teacher. So if they are supporting, it's always been something that has been presented by the teacher, and then it might be review. Or reinforcement of a skill that has been learned and needs to be, just practiced by the student or students again. Paraeducators also support students in regular education. So they may work with a small group of students when they are pushing into a social studies or a science, or in high school they may be pushing into an elective, and they will work with those students to help with organization or note-taking, preparing for tests, those types of things. The difference between a paraeducator and a personal care assistant is our personal care assistants are assigned one-on-one to a student, and they support the student pretty much in all aspects of the student's life. We're looking at academic support, safety, personal care, really making sure they get from point A to point B throughout the day. We also have students, as far as that personal care, we have students who have toileting needs and feeding needs, and the PCAs, or personal care assistants, will support the students with those needs throughout the day. So those are our support staff. We also contract supports from IU13. And at this point, what we're looking, these are supports that we have not quite enough students to have our own support person at this time. So we still contract with the IU. Physical therapy. Physical therapy are students who are working on the gross motor skills and support in those areas. Hearing support, vision support, itinerant autistic support, and Meredith spoke about this. This is support that's provided to our students on the spectrum, possibly working with the student in class, or even supporting teachers who are working with our students who are on the spectrum with strategies as far as in the classroom, possibly with coping, or with testing, with classwork, whatever it may be. So that's the itinerant autistic support. We also have some classrooms that programs that we do contract with the intermediate unit. That is multiple disability support, and then there are some center-based programs. Center-based programs are, excuse me, smaller classrooms that are not located in school buildings. And this is when I was talking earlier about least restrictive environment. Really, when we're looking at students who need a lot of support working with their skill level, the center-based program they're very, very specific to the area that they're working on with the students. And that's where we contract in some of those areas with the IU. Yes? Job training, very good, thank you, yes. We missed one.
I just found that out from social work.
Yes, thank you. Now, we put together a slide just to share with you. We gave you a broad brush of the things that are happening here at Hempfield, and then we thought there's other things that, just as far as a broad brush, other things that are happening here that kind of go above and beyond. The blended programming we do. Meredith talked about autistic support, life skills support, learning support. I think one of the beauties in a district our size, and yes, we have many elementary schools. We have 7. We have 2 middle schools. And then we come to this amazing, sometimes a little intimidating, even myself, high school. However, what we are able to do is blend programming for students. No student is cookie cutter. You know that as parents. I am a parent myself. So yes, we may have students who, at points in their career, autistic support meets their needs. But as they grow and mature, their portions of their day may be appropriate for that. But life skills, we need to add some blending. So a little bit of autistic support, regular education, life skills, a little bit of life skills, a little bit of learning support, a little bit of regular education. That's the beauty of what we are capable of doing in a district our size. I think some people think of Hempfield and how overwhelming it is. Yeah, but let's think of the beauty of what we can do with the programming we have. And blended programming is something I think we've taken a lot of pride in. And we're not just doing it at our high school. We are able to do it even at the elementary level with some of our students. This is an area is bringing high-cost kiddos back to district. And what I mean by that is one of the things that I've kind of taken personally, I know Meredith and Kelly's new to the team this year, is we have, when I talk about those kiddos who are going to center-based programs, and those programs are appropriate for students with needs, that at that particular time in their career, it's the best placement for them. It is their least restrictive environment. But one thing that we are very passionate about is no placement is where that student needs to spend their entire career unless it meets their needs. And we as IEP teams make those decisions on an as-needed basis. But what we are driven to try to do is bring our kiddos back to Hempfield. We want to build programs here so that our students and their parents feel like they're Hempfield students, because you are. And I know time and time again, because I work a lot with the students who are in IU13 programs, they're still Hempfield students, but they feel disconnected sometimes. And this is where, how can we build programs? How can we make sure that our students are in district and getting what they need here? And that's something we're really trying and striving to do, is ensuring that the students that are here are getting what they need, and we are educating them as much as we can as Hempfield students in Hempfield programs. Speaking of center-based programs, we have been able to open 2 at the Landisville Education Center, which half of the Landisville Education Center is our tech department, and the other half is used for the alternative education. And then we've been able to kind of carve out our own space to have therapeutic emotional support. A little different than the regular emotional support. Therapeutic emotional support is supporting students who struggle with mental health. Not as much as the behavioral piece may still be there, but the mental health piece has really impacted those students in their school. And so we have 2 therapeutic emotional support classes at LEC. One is a high school class, and believe it or not, the other one is an elementary class. We don't have a middle school class yet, but maybe someday, as those elementary kiddos grow, we'll either grow the class or we'll end up needing a middle school class also. We're not sure. And Meredith did share this. This year, last year we grew our autistic support club program to the high school, and this year actually we added another elementary class so that we were able to have K through 12th grade, which is nice. Before, what would happen with our students that needed autistic support is our elementary may be a little heavy and we may not be able to have kindergartners there, and we'd have to contract with the IU for kindergarten and then maybe bring them back in first, but that's a tough transition. But now we can have our kindergartners in district also. So, and I think that's everything. I know that was a broad brush overview of what it looks like here in Hempfield School District Special Education. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
I was just wondering, I have 2 sons. My oldest son transferred from elementary to middle school with itinerant learning support, so it was kind of similar. Now my younger son is in full-time learning support, so I'm curious about the transition to middle school, what that's going to look like, and how's that going to be different from itinerant. You know what I mean? Because it seems like kind of a shock for him because he's in.
And it does look a little bit different in middle school than, oh, sorry. It does look a little bit different in middle school than it does in elementary. However, we still do have that same level of support. Most of the students who transition from that level of support in elementary to the middle school will receive what we call replacement classes in the middle school, they have reading and English are two separate classes, and then math. And then based on level, students will go to regular education, science and social studies, which for some students in the full-time learning support classroom in elementary, that's very similar. And for others, they've not gone to science and social studies before. So that sometimes can be a little bit of a different, that can be a little bit different for them when they first transition. But we do have meetings in the spring where we get together we get the teachers together to really talk about the students and their needs and what it should look like in middle school. And then we also do have meetings with parents so that you can provide input and we also can help with that transition plan. And some students, we take them on multiple tours of the middle school if that's an area of need that they have. For other students, they're okay with just doing the one building tour. So we really do individualize it based on student need.
Will you get more than, like, my older son who was not in full-time has a half hour, I think, a day.
Like during flex of support.
Will my other son have any more than that, or is it gonna look kind of similar?
Well, because those core subject areas are within the learning support classroom, that is already a lot more support than that, but they also still will participate in flex and get additional support in there.
Okay, so the full-time learning support kids and the itinerant kids, when they're in elementary, look very different, but when they're in middle school, they're kind of more similar? Because there's no specific really like full-time learning support.
There is. We do have case managers that case manage the full-time caseload, and we keep their class size small, just like it is in elementary. But because everyone is switching classes, it might look a little less different in the middle school than it does in elementary. But whatever level of support he needs, we will provide it. And like Dee was saying, because it's not cookie cutter, it's not to say that he wouldn't have some sort of unique programming based on whatever his needs are.
Is it both 7th and 8th?
Correct, yes. And most times, students who are in that full-time learning support type setting will have the same case manager for 7th and 8th unless we have a staffing change. They typically have the same case manager for those 2 years. So similar to elementary where they have the same one for 3 years.
And then how would it look here in high school?
We also have teachers for that at the high school as well. Again, as students are getting,
Go outside.
yep, as they're getting older and they're gaining more independence, it looks a little different, but the support is still here and as much as they need.
Here you go.
Correct, we don't do that. There are sometimes rumors that we do that, but we don't do that.
Okay, I'm getting to wrap it up, Simon.